Let's talk about every horror movie I watched in October. October is one of the busiest months of the year for us spooky people. I try to watch a horror movie every day for the month, and I think I watched over 30 films. So let's jump into it because I watched some new movies and revisited some old favorites. I kicked off the month with the new found footage style horror movie Haunted Ulster Live. This is kind of like Ghostwatch meets WNUF Halloween special, and it's centered on a news broadcast in 1998 on Halloween in Belfast. I think while this one doesn't really reinvent the wheel for that subgenre, it's very charming and has those nostalgic vibes that I was looking for Halloween. I think the characters are charming and it leads to an interesting finale. I think it's really fun. You can stream this on Screambox. Then I checked out Strange Darling, which is more of a psychological thriller about a one-night stand between two people that goes horribly wrong. This one has incredible performances by Willa Fitzgerald and Kyle Gallner as the two people going through this situation. I think it's incredibly violent at times and it's told in a non-linear fashion. The story is really unique and it kind of subverts your expectations a little bit. Then I rewatched WNUF Halloween special, which is or was streaming on Shudder. This is basically a live broadcast on Halloween from a news station, and they have a news reporter on site at an infamous haunted house. He brings in some psychics and things go wrong. I also love that they incorporate some fake commercials throughout and some fun segments with dentists and interviews with people on the street dressed in costume, and it just feels authentic. Then I checked out Salem's Lot, which is the remake of Stephen King's horror book of the same name. This premiered on Max earlier in October and it had been shelved for a very long time, so I tried to keep an open mind going into this and being excited because it is one of my favorite Stephen King stories. It starts off strong, but then it lost me pretty much halfway through the movie because it lacked all of the heart and the characterization of the original story, and it feels like so much was stripped away from this movie and so much was missing. It just felt hollow. The movie has incredible performances from the cast, but we don't really get much of the town itself. We don't really get much of Barlow and Stryker. We don't get anything of the Marston house. It's just everything is happening so quick. I think it's a solid movie, like an average watch. There's just something missing that it didn't work completely for me. I think it has some interesting set pieces, especially towards the end. There's a whole moment in the drive-in that's pretty cool, but I wasn't impressed with Barlow himself. He just didn't look good to me. I just wish it was longer. Then I checked out the Speak No Evil remake starring James McAvoy, and this is about an American couple who meet this British family while on vacation, and the British family invite them to stay with them in their home, and they decide to go. And when they get there, they realize this family isn't who they thought they were. This one follows the original, I want to say Danish version, pretty closely, where you're seeing these families interact and the uncomfortableness of that situation. But I think where it differs is the last act of the film. It's a lot more satisfying to watch, just more exciting, and the ending is way more satisfying than the original. And I feel like they're both good companions for each other. Like, the original version will leave you super infuriated and dissatisfied, while this one does something completely different and leaves you feeling differently. I think they can be viewed together. James McAvoy is amazing as the lead villain. He's so good at being like charming and likable, but also really scary in an instant. Then I checked out What's Inside, which is currently streaming on Netflix, and this was a pleasant surprise. It's basically like Bodies, but better. About a group of friends who gather for a pre-wedding party, and one of their friends shows up and he has this game that he wants them all to play, and they decide to play it, and it starts off fun, but then it turns into a nightmare when something goes wrong. It was just really surprising, and it gets pretty dark, and the performances from the cast are great. It's just a fun idea, a fresh idea. Then I revisited the Poughkeepsie Tapes, which is a found footage horror movie that is essentially a documentary about this serial killer and the tapes that he kept documenting his serial killings. This one is super dark. It's very disturbing because it just feels real. The serial killer himself is horrible and he mostly targets women, so the stuff you're seeing is stuff he's done to women. One victim in particular he keeps for a very long time and tortures her, and you get to see how that plays out, and it's just sad, it's scary, and it felt too real. Then I revisited Hell House LLC, which is a Halloween classic at this point, I think. It's a found footage horror movie about a group of people who are renovating an old hotel to turn it into a haunt for Halloween. And on opening night, something goes horribly wrong. So you're seeing their footage as they're redoing this house and getting it ready for the haunt, and then you see what happens that night. This one is just like a slow build to that finale, but I think they do a really good job at creating this really creepy, unsettling atmosphere and this sense of dread throughout, because you know something wrong is gonna happen. And there's some great subtle moments in this, subtle scares, where there's one where a character is going around the corner and he sees somebody dressed in a clown mask, and he thinks it's one of his friends playing a prank on him, but then he realizes they're all sitting somewhere else, so it couldn't have been them. So well done, so effective. I think they're coming out with another movie in this franchise now at this point. Lineage, I think it's called. So I'm here for it. It's coming out in 2025. Very excited to see where this story goes because it has grown and expanded from this first one. Then I revisited The Houses October Built, which is another similar style haunt set found footage horror movie. It's about a group of people who are trying to find the most extreme haunts for Halloween. And we get to see them traveling via RV to different haunts around the US. And then they find out about this one specific haunt that is supposed to be the most extreme haunt ever, and they're trying to find it. And then they get a little in too deep. This one feels authentic, like you're really watching this group of friends have fun at these haunted houses. When they're interviewing people at the haunts and showcasing the haunts themselves, those parts are really cool. Then I revisited the McPherson Tape, which is one of the first found footage style horror movies to exist. This predates Blair Witch and The Last Broadcast. It's a home video of a family celebrating their niece's birthday, and they spot an alien that has crashed out in their backyard, and they go explore it, and then the aliens start messing with them in the house. I think that what's really cool is that it's one of the first to do this. It's very effective in that way. It's very slow though, and you can see that there were budget limitations, but I love the idea of this alien crashing and them being able to capture it because they were filming a birthday party. I think the alien stuff is cool when you get to see it, but there isn't enough of that, and it's a lot of this family just kind of arguing back and forth. I don't think it's really good, but it is charming. Then I revisited Creep, which is about a guy who gets hired to film this other guy who is filming videos because he's dying of cancer and his wife is pregnant, and he wants his kid to be able to watch these videos. But as he's spending the day with him, he starts to realize there's something off with this guy. Like, he's a little too nice, and he's also weird. It gets really creepy and dark, and it's really unexpected, and I think Mark Duplass is incredible. He's equally likable but also creepy, and I think he balanced it very well in this movie. And the story has grown from this first one, and now they're coming out with the Creep tapes on Shudder in November, so I'm very excited about that. Then I watched Diabolique for the first time, and this is a French horror movie. This is a movie about a woman who plots with her husband's mistress to murder the husband because he's a horrible person. He's abusive, he's toxic, he's disgusting. So they murder him or go through with the plot, but then his body disappears, and they don't know if he's dead or if he's alive, if he's a ghost, and they start being haunted throughout the rest of the movie. And it's really interesting. It's a unique story that I don't know if it would still be as shocking to today's audiences. The twist in the story is really interesting. Then I watched Terrifier, the first one, which was actually my first time. I started with Terrifier 2. Stayed away from Terrifier 1 for a long time because it just sounded like it was just watching Art kill random people, and that's what it is. It's basically just him as this clown on Halloween attacking people randomly. There's no real story until the second one. I think that watching it, it's impressive for the gore and special effects for such a low budget, what they were able to accomplish. But yeah, it's a little boring. After a while it gets old because he's just doing the same thing over and over, and I like the second one more. Then I went and saw Terrifier 3, which is a step up in the previous two films. They definitely have more money, so they have actual good actors in this movie, legitimate actors. It looks better visually, and I think Art himself is just incredible. He's so funny and having fun in this movie. And in this one, it's set in Christmas. He is terrorizing people around Christmas time with Victoria, who was one of his victims from the first film. And you learn a little bit more about the lore that's going on there. It's a little confusing to me, but also at the same time, Sienna is struggling with PTSD from the events of part 2, and she's convinced that Art is coming back, and there's going to be a final showdown between them. I think this one has some really impressive, creative kills, especially towards the end of the movie. This movie made so much money, which is amazing. So we're definitely gonna get a part 4. And I watched Daddy's Head, which is currently streaming on Shudder, and so many people have been calling this one of the scariest movies of the year. I was so fucking bored. I'm sorry. I tried, I watched it. It's about a boy whose dad dies tragically, and he starts seeing this like entity. This entity takes shape of his father and his head, and he's got this like creepy grinning smile. That stuff was cool. The look of him, it's very uncanny and unsettling, and it gets under your skin, and the whole concept is kind of like about grief and what it can do to you. I think that people said this is better than The Babadook. I disagree. I think The Babadook did it way better. Then I watched Mr. Crocket, which is a new Hulu original that came out for Halloween, and I really liked this one. It's about this television show host that essentially kills parents and kidnaps the kids, and he does this through a cursed videotape situation where parents will find this tape in like a little library in the neighborhood, and they'll put it on for their kids, and their kids become like hypnotized by this show, and they start acting out, and Mr. Crocket really controls them, and he kidnaps them and brings them into his little magical adventurous world that's filled with these creepy puppets. And the movie surprisingly has some pretty gory moments, especially because Mr. Crocket kills the parents in pretty violent ways. He feels like Freddy Krueger meets Mr. Rogers. He himself, the actor who played Mr. Crocket, is amazing. He's so fun and scary, and just the concept itself I love. There's a lot of puppetry and real practical effects in this, which I think makes the movie stand out, and I think it was a lot of fun. Then I watched Caddo Lake on HBO Max, which is more of a psychological thriller, I want to say. It's produced by M. Night Shyamalan. This one is about this town where a young girl goes missing, and these two people whose lives are kind of wrapped up in it. I can't say too much without spoiling it, but there's a point in the movie like halfway where they reveal something and you understand what the hell's going on, and I was like, holy shit, I was not expecting that. So it was a nice surprise how everything is all connected, and it was interesting, but I think give it a shot. It took some time to get going because you're like, how are these people connected? Then when you realize it makes sense, and it's pretty cool. Then I checked out Red Rooms, which is a psychological thriller about a woman who is obsessed with this true crime case, and this case is really dark and disturbing. It's about a guy who kidnapped these young girls, and he documented what he did to them and put it on the dark web. This woman is obsessed with being in this world and finding one of the tapes that the police haven't found yet, and I think the whole thing is just kind of a look into her mental health and her obsession, and kind of commentating on our culture's obsession with true crime and how it can become a little inappropriate and too much at times. I thought it was really good. It's a really dark story. You don't really see much, but the idea of everything, it's kind of like a courtroom drama, so you are hearing parts of the case, and that stuff is really hard to hear and disturbing and scary. It's scary to think that there are people out there like this. And I revisited Ghostwatch, which is a Halloween staple for me. This is about a live broadcast on Halloween night where a news crew is in a house of a mother and her two daughters, and they're documenting poltergeist activity, and the show basically starts out slowly, and then the paranormal activity ramps up over the evening, and it gets crazy. This one is so cool and iconic because it had such a moment in history on BBC where many people who saw it thought it was real because they used real news people from that time. It's not super scary, but I think that it does lead up to some really creepy moments. I wish I could have been one of those people who saw it when it initially aired and thought it was real, because that would have been amazing. Then I checked out Alien Romulus, which is the newest movie in the Alien franchise, and this is about a crew who are going to salvage some parts off of this ship in the middle of nowhere, but when they get there, they realize that there's an alien species on this ship, and things go crazy from there. I think that this was a lot of fun. It doesn't really bring anything super new to the Alien franchise, but I thought it was really entertaining, and there are some creepy moments throughout, especially the final act when you see this alien in its form. I was not expecting it. It's so creepy. Then I checked out a few underrated Halloween movies, which I included in a separate video. Those movies were Hauntedween, Murder Party, The Hollow, and Scary Movie. If you want to learn more about them, you can go check out that video. I'll link it down below. They're all movies set around Halloween, and they're fun. I checked out Smile 2, which focuses on a pop singer who gets cursed with this smile curse right before she heads out on a global comeback tour. So she's experiencing terrifying visions, hallucinations, and a lot of stuff. I think Naomi Scott is amazing in this. She gives one of the best performances ever. She can really scream and cry, but I think the movie felt a little too long. The story wasn't that interesting to me. I found that the middle of this story was so boring and nothing was happening, and as you continue to watch, Sky Riley is just kind of so unlikable in comparison to Sosie Bacon's character in part 1, and she doesn't really do anything to learn more about her situation. It's just kind of the same thing over and over again. She's crying, she's hysterical, she's seeing things repeat. While she's amazing, she's given an amazing performance, I was just bored. I just felt like they didn't really add anything to the story, and it leads to a pretty predictable finale. I think that the monster itself also didn't look as good as it did in part 1. I really liked the opening of this movie because we see Kyle Gallner's character from part 1 and how he is dealing with the aftermath of the first movie, and it was so good. I think it's interesting, the idea of addiction and mental health and anxiety that were shown in this movie through the pop star, and I think she did a great job at highlighting her anxiety, and you feel really anxious watching it, but I was just kind of bored. I was ready for it to be over. Then I watched What Happens Next Will Scare You, which is from the same team behind WNUF Halloween Special, and this is about a group of journalists who are trying to find 13 of the scariest videos online to put in a listicle for Halloween. You're basically watching them show their videos to the editor, and throughout the course of the evening, creepy stuff starts happening, and the stuff in the videos starts to happen in real life. I think that this one was really creative with some of the videos. Some of the stuff was pretty scary. Like, there was one that was so creative, it was just a 911 call of this mortician who was being haunted by the uncremated bodies around his mortuary. It's so effective, and I just thought it was really fun. It was a unique take on the found footage style horror. Then I checked out Carved, which is a new Hulu original about this reenactment town that begins being terrorized by a giant killer pumpkin on Halloween. It is very silly and ridiculous, and I love the concept of this killer pumpkin. I think that the movie just kind of meanders a lot in the middle, where it felt like the characters were stalling to prolong the story because they're stuck on this farm being chased by this pumpkin, but a lot doesn't happen. It's just a lot of talking and like running from place to place on the farm, where I feel like things could have happened quicker, and the characters do stupid things, and it's not that good, but it is silly and entertaining at times, and I think if you're looking for a movie to just shut off your mind, I think this is a good one to watch, especially for Halloween, because it does have those good Halloween vibes. Then I checked out Cult from Koji, I'm not even going to try to say his name. This is the same director of Nori, The Curse, and this is about a news crew that are investigating a haunting at this house. Things get crazy. People become possessed, and it's very weird. There's like dark demon tentacle creatures that show up, and there's this ghost hunter that's kind of like a character out of an anime movie who comes in to help, and it's just silly. I don't think this movie takes itself seriously at all, but there are some unique moments, some creepy moments. It's not that good, but it's also not that bad. I had fun with it. I thought it was ridiculous. Then I revisited Tales from the Hood, which is such a good horror anthology, and this one follows 3 thugs who show up at a mortuary to get some stuff, and the mortician invites them in, and while they're there, he tells them different stories about the bodies around his morgue, and we see stuff dealing with police brutality, racism, abuse. The movie handles some pretty heavy topics, but it does so well and effectively, where they incorporate the horror elements into it very well and very creatively. It has some really dark imagery, and it has one of the best endings ever. It's so satisfying and so just over the top. And I revisited revisited 13 Ghosts, which is a movie about this family who inherits a home from an uncle they never knew they had, and then they learn that there's 13 ghosts trapped in the basement, and they are trapped in there. This one is so fun. This movie scared the shit out of me when I was little, and I think it gets a lot of hate for some reason. I don't know why, because I think the concept is really cool. The ghosts themselves are really cool. Each of them has their own backstory, and some of them are really creepy, and Matthew Lillard is amazing. Tony Shalhoub is too. It's just got a great cast and setting, and yeah, there's some flashy, twitchy vibes when they highlight certain things that was not cool, but overall I think the story is really entertaining and scary, and some of these ghosts are really scary. Then I revisited Paranormal Activity, which is a found footage horror movie about a couple who are experiencing paranormal activity. So the boyfriend gets a camera and he starts to document it, and when he does so, the activity kind of ramps up because the entity doesn't like what he's doing. He kind of antagonizes it. I think this is one of the most effective and scary found footage horror movies ever. The slow buildup of the paranormal activity is so well done, and how they show it through the bedroom camera at night, so each time you're like anticipating it, it's so scary. The dread is just overpowering, and I love how they bring in a psychic who's like, he's too freaked out to even come into the house. He's like, no, you got a big problem here. I think Mika, the boyfriend, is horrible. I never realized how horrible he was until I rewatched it. He's doing everything against Katie's wishes. Like, she doesn't even want to film it. He's told not to get a Ouija board, and he gets a Ouija board. He does a lot of things to antagonize and rile up this entity, and he makes it worse for Katie. There's one scene in particular where she gets dragged out of her bed, which will just haunt me forever. It's so well done, and it's so scary, and I love it. And I revisited John Carpenter's Village of the Damned from 1995. This is about a small town that is visited by something one day where it puts them all asleep, and when they wake up, all the women are pregnant, and 9 months later they all give birth to these children. They have these powers, they all have white hair, they are all the same. They're just really creepy. Over the course of the film, you see how dangerous these children become, and the adults in the town try to figure out how to handle it. This one is a little cheesy and dated, but I love the small town vibes. It feels like a Stephen King story to me, and I think the idea of these women being impregnated by an alien force is terrifying. Then I revisited The Haunting of Julia, which is one of the best ghost stories ever. This one stars Mia Farrow as a grieving mother who moves into a new apartment, and she begins experiencing paranormal activity of a child, and she thinks it's her daughter, but she soon learns that it's the spirit of another child. So she starts to investigate to find out who this child is and what happened to them, to see if she can help. And what she learns is really dark and disturbing. I think that this story is very somber, very moody and bleak, and it has a very dark and disturbing ending. I think Mia Farrow is amazing, and the story really highlights grief and child loss very well, and just how overpowering that grief can be. It's just really sad, and I love it. It's very similar in vibe to The Changeling and Don't Look Now, and I highly recommend it. It's currently on Tubi. Then I ended off the month watching Halloween H2O, which is one of my favorites in the franchise. This is set 20 years after the first film, and it follows Laurie Strode, who is now working in a boarding school in California. She has a son. Michael Myers, he somehow finds her and terrorizes her. A lot of people compare this to Scream because it does have that Scream feel to it, but I love this one. It was one of the first ones I was able to see in the theater. I think that, yes, the masks are terrible, but I love the idea of this school. I love the characters, and the deaths are pretty fun. I also love the moment when Laurie and Michael first see each other again, and then the finale is amazing, except it was ruined by the next movie in the franchise. But overall, I love it. I think it's so much fun, and I like what they did with Laurie's character in this versus 2018. Whew, and there you have it. Those are all the horror movies I watched in October. That's a lot of stuff, and I didn't get to everything I wanted to watch, but we can still continue the Halloween season into November, so I'm hopefully gonna get to some of them then. Let me know what movies you watched in October, if you checked out any new to you ones, and if you watched any of the movies I mentioned. I hope you had an amazing Halloween season, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time. Bye.